Here, okay, it's starting. So, Gianfranco, Manuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nico, and thank you to all of you to find the time to be with us. We have so much to say and so much to share with you, between Manuel and me. So I will just go down into content. I will share the slide also for you, Manuel. You just tell me when you need me to go to the next one. The agenda for today is simply an introduction of what we do. We will describe what the European data space landscape is for the ones of you who slept under a rock for the last 3 years. We've been doing a lot of work. What's data space and why do we need them given this context? We will describe the two projects in more detail, particularly from perspective of what we do for you that you can reuse and you can join us in developing further. And what's next for the two initiatives with a kind of a spectrum of 6 months or something like that. And we hope to have time at the end for questions. And Nico said already, prepare them, be warm and hot for the time we are ready for you. But let's start from the European landscape, and that's for, of course, Manuel to describe as an officer. Please, Manuel, tell us more about what the European data space landscape is.
So, good morning to both. Thank you very much, Nico, for the initiative. And I think it's always good to prepare conferences and big gatherings ahead. So I'm happy to be part of for the time being, of the warm-up and in due course of the big D-Day. Gianfranco, always a pleasure to see you. For those seeing Gianfranco and myself for the first time, we do this exercise about twice per year, but every time we improve and we try to go a bit further in explaining how we do what we do, how we work together, and to present an even more integrated way. And I hope we succeed in improving here today again. It falls on me to give you a bit the political background and the overall landscape. Let me use the occasion before I zoom on my face to wave hello to Valentina, who's just in front of me, who has prepared today's intervention, and I've got a few other colleagues online as well for the complicated questions that I'm not able to answer myself. So the political landscape, it always starts with a nice report, in this case two of them, the Letta and the Draghi report, out of which we've extracted here some of the salient quotes relevant to the topic of discussion today, which is about data. Moving to the next slide, Gianfranco. Those reports were then shifted into the Commission intentions for this legislative period. You all know that the new College of Commissioners is in place since beginning of December. And in that context, the President gives missions to our college, in this case to our Commissioner, Executive Vice President Henna Virkkunen, where she puts forward the idea of going even further in our European data strategy, which is now really called the Data Union Strategy. The semantic change looks little, but the underlying meaning is quite important and deep. And the idea is to really build on existing data rules, and here there's a clear reference to the legislative endorsements and decisions that have been taken under the previous Commission mandate, and to go much further in making in growing the economy around them throughout Europe. Next slide. This is where we are, broadly speaking, today. We have the data legislation that I was mentioning on top, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and the Open Data Directive, which are all legislative background documents that are dealt here in DG Connect, and the infamous GDPR, which is dealt by our colleagues from DG Just, but which altogether provide the foundations over which common European data spaces and all the rest that you see below have been developing. European data spaces by nature are sectoral, and you see there the sectors as we've been defining them over the years. It is the ones that are there on screen are the ones we actively support with budget, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But it's fair to say that other colleagues from other directorate generals are as well working on their respective data spaces. For example, one on public procurement or on financial markets, on things like this come on top of what you see in sectors. And then the rest of the boxes are really a number of support actions and flanking measures to help those data spaces come to reality. Two of them have got their logos. It's the Data Space Support Center that Gianfranco represents today. He's more than representing, he's the boss of it. He will make a better, we will describe what they do in itself in a moment. But then there's a technical infrastructure layer, which is meant to be really the, if you want, the engine that makes the whole thing work. You see a number of boxes which are related more to computing infrastructure. Of course, digital identity and standards play an important role, but I'm here more to represent the middle box, Simpl, the smart middleware solution to provide a common technical background to all those data spaces. Next slide. So
yes, let's go.
I think this is where I move to Gianfranco. But Gianfranco, if you feel like you wanted to compliment me on the previous slide, I don't mind at all. No?
No, no worries. I would I will not let you get away with it if I spotted something that was missing. Don't worry. But let's save time for the questions and to go through the difficult part that possibly is this one that I usually tend to present to a newbie audience because the topic of data space is still not that well understood. So in the next 5 minutes, I will probably boil it down to something a bit too simple. But don't worry, if you want to, we can take it outside and I can speak for hours with a more complicated version of the same, okay? But so why are data spaces so important? Why we insist so much about this stuff? The guy on the picture is Ilya Sutskever. He was chief scientist at OpenAI until a few months ago. And in a conference in December said something as straightforward as what you see on screen. We've achieved peak data. There will be no more. We have to deal with the data we have. There's only one internet. And he connected back to the idea that was quite common to say that data is the new oil from a negative point of view. The data is the fossil fuel. It's run out. It's not sustainable. And that is perhaps the way most of us think, and particularly perhaps not in Europe, have to think. And why? Simply because we think we don't have alternatives. So if we need to find data to feed our applications, where do we go? We probably go to our friends at the publications office and try to take everything we can from the data.europa.eu, whether it is EU institutions or member states data, reference or open data in general. Many of us probably scrape public available sources as much as we can. Of course, you do it legally, right? You never read the footer saying all rights reserved, things like that. I didn't tell you. Or you go and license commercially available sources from traditional data platform. There must be a different way. The reason Europe insisted so much over the last few days, years, for the model to change is because we don't want this kind of picture. We don't want the ones of us who need data to just have to find a bag of money, go into the kings of the data sharing platforms and buy what they need to. This model is not sustainable. Besides, we don't want to recreate monopolies. We need a more fair data economy, at least for Europe, that particularly is characterized for small and medium enterprises that may not find that kind of money to buy the data that we need. So the kind of model the data spaces implement is more like a group of friends going for a picnic together. Nobody is a platform. Someone takes the tools, say the forks and the knives. Someone else brings the food. I'm the Italian, I probably bring the wine. Someone else will bring the, I don't know, the stuff to sit on the grass and everything. But the idea is that we do not have a super powerful entity at the center dominating the game. You will also notice that we almost never use the term marketplace because it comes with a sort of a connotation that is commercial. For sure, you can still buy or sell data, but that's not necessarily the only business model you can imagine in this context. You may go to the picnic just to be with your friends and create together innovation. You may do it because your big competitor is too powerful and you need to come up with ways to work together. You may do it because simply you want the good for society. So it's not about a matter of money. It's just a matter of bringing data together for your societal impact application you have in mind. If you are more on the scientific or academic side of the picture, I'll give you also something that will make you happy. That is the definition that at the moment is coming from CNECT. This was at the end of the Trusted Data Transaction workshop that completed a few months ago. The work is still ongoing, but they would define a data space as an interoperable framework based on common governance principles, standards, practices, and enabling services that enables trusted data transaction between participants. Now, if I take the slide off and I ask you to repeat that, you will not remember, right? It's a bit complicated, it's fine. What I don't like in this one is that it does not capture that kind of spirit of collaboration between peers, not as much as I, at least personally, would like to. Besides, there's one more element that does not come out of the definition, that the real reason we're also doing this is because we also need those little words between brackets. We need to go towards the level of automation that makes this possible at large scale. Because if we need to share data just between 2 or 3 organizations, if we don't need to do it automatically, perhaps the old-fashioned way of sending you an Excel email is good enough, but we're moving away from that. The kind of application we're trying to design and build these days look more like this, when there are lots and lots of participants, as much as possible working automatically in an automated way between them, and you as a semantic community know exactly why this is needed, to build the applications that we do not have yet and finding that picnic that can make us happy and provide the data we need. So in what way do our 2 initiatives, the Data Space Support Center and Simpl, try to get into that direction? The picture to the left is something that at the ICC we simply call the co-creation method. It's the typical stages you would expect from 0 to data spaces, let's say. You all start with a kind of an exploration where the stakeholders are aligned on the scope of the data spaces. When the Digital Europe program started funding data spaces, most of the work was of that kind. They were mostly CSAs, for example. After the stakeholders are aligned, you probably go in preparation, where you develop the use cases that you want specifically to support with the data space, and you want to identify functional requirements for the environment. That is also probably the point where you start thinking of establishing an organizational form for the data space. Is it a cooperative? Is it something else? It's a commercial thingy. As you move to implementation, let's say you're leaving a little the space of the data space support center that's focused on the top part, and you move in the space of Simpl. So what is the functional analysis of the actual design you want to implement for your data space? How do you establish data space agreements and policies? You remember, it's one of the characteristics of a data space that we move according to agreed set of policies, sometimes called rulebook, by the way. And then, of course, at some point, you build the thing. That is where you choose the software components you need, and you finally go for deployment. In many of your cases, perhaps that you're watching, using Simpl. DCC is a grant. We were started in 2022, so we are a little older. the other project. And the Commission was so nice to find more funding for a future project. We don't know yet who will be running that, but we will talk about this later. While Manuel, tell us about Simpl as a project, and then I'll take you to the detail.
Yes, thank you, Gianfranco. I'll keep on with the Simpl in a second. I very much stand by what you said a moment ago about the sense-and-elect definition. It sounds like a machine, the description, which is probably suitable for the context it was created for. But I very much stand by what you said, that this is first and foremost a community of organizations with a similar ambition and are willing to trust each other and multiply the benefits of their data. So complementing what Gianfranco was saying on this slide and introducing Simpl, the calendars as they appear here on the screen don't seem to be very much aligned. But in reality, the two initiatives started exactly at the same time on the Commission side, in the sense that from the beginning we said three things. First, we need to support data spaces directly, and this is where the box by box of the earlier slide stands. Then we need a support center to coordinate the views, to really support them in all possible manners, and that's what Gianfranco said. But then at the same time, we said we need something to provide the common technical tools so that all those data spaces don't reinvent each other the wheel and develop different wheels that would not have been compatible in between them. Think about the image I always have in mind is this railroad system in Europe where trains in between France and Spain are not compatible because the width of the rails is different. And so both countries find out a working solution for them, but they're not really interoperable, at least in an easier manner. And so this is a little bit the spirit of Simpl, is to develop those common technical tools so that it can be used all at once. And you see there in the box the three sub items, if you want, that we develop within Simpl. First is Simpl Open, which is really the common technical tool by itself. It is called open because it's open source, so that everyone can reuse and adapt them to its own needs. But because we felt this was a little bit too basic to call it like this, there's two other initiatives out of the Simpl box, if you want. One is the Simpl Labs, which is the idea that you should be able to experiment with the open source solution at low cost and low entry barrier. So it's a testing platform in itself. And then to help specific data spaces to onboard and deploy Simpl Open for their own needs, we've developed this approach of Simpl Live, where we accompany specific data spaces in their actual deployment of Simpl Open and in this customization that they need. The dates there that are stated there are, again, not really the whole vision, because we did some preliminary study in 22 and 23, and because we have funding that goes beyond 27, but it's just to say the current contractual ongoing contracts that are developing and deploying Simpl Open Labs and Live. And there's several of them which I can explain if you are interested.
Thank you, Manuel. And you're right, this started much earlier, to the point that I seem to remember that most of the specification for the two projects were actually ready just before COVID-19. And then COVID made a mess, of course, over all of our timeline. But yeah, we are recovering from that. But let's go into the detail of what we offer European organizations and individuals in preparing for this kind of transformation. This slide is very rich, but we will take you a bit at a time through each of these stages. The two projects can actually, all of them, in a way, we mirror each other with different scopes of work. And that goes from the way we build on the community that we try to foster, the way we distill pre-existing knowledge and content and assets into our outputs, the way we synthesize it. So we choose carefully what we believe works best for Europe. Sometimes we change a bit its flavor. We build, that's what Manuel Mateo already described in the software that is the middleware that Simpl Open is. We provide some degree of support to those assets and let's say the audiences we serve. And as we are doing here with you today, we disseminate what we do, because it's important that you know, otherwise who will take advantage of that taxpayers' money? It's all for you, right, guys? So don't forget this one. But let's go one by one through these stages. And let's start from how we rely on our community. Manuel, can I ask you to start on this one?
Yes, of course. So you will have seen that there's one or two logos at each of the steps, and when there's two logos, it's because we both do elements on community building. On the Simpl side, again, because it's a technical. It's technical tools, it's software. The community building dimension is about first having a simple open source community built around Simpl, which means that our developments are as transparent as possible, meaning that we publish the requirements and their elicitation as we do the work. So this work is completely transparent, and we do so, and we go from the requirements to then the detailed requirements, which become user stories, which become code, and which are supported by documentation. And all this is done transparently on our websites in plural. One is more for, if you want more redactional content, so things to be read. And another one is more the technical code itself in a repository. But beyond this, and inspired by open source common practices, the intention is not only to develop our own open source community, but to embed it into a broader setup of open source existing communities, in the sense that we reuse existing components left and right, and where applicable, when we reuse, we adapt those tools, and when it makes sense, we feed back these modified tools into their original community. So it's really the spirit of the open source approach to software development, where you use, reuse, improve, give back to the community. This is the spirit. It's fair to say that it's not something that has been at the moment don't produce huge results, but we're getting there. We should have our first external contribution back to the community in the coming weeks, and the spirit is really along those lines within the team.
On the SSC side, instead, it's in the name, right? We are required to provide support. The Commission asks the SSC to coordinate and guide the many data spaces funded by the EC that you've seen in Manuel's Mateo earlier. So the sectoral ones, you may call them. So we run what we may call a community of practice of those data spaces, depending on where they kind of moment in the life cycle they are. We have colleagues of ours that manage that relationship, get close to them, try to understand their needs and so on, and also capture their requirements, not necessarily towards Simpl only, but in general to describe what a European data space should feel like, according to what you say. I mean, at risk of diminishing myself and my colleagues, what the SSC knows is what you know. This stuff is too new. We're not coming down from an ivory tower to teach how this stuff works. This is you telling us, and we synthesizing the whole thing. We also run what we call a strategic stakeholder forum that is more for organizations that are interested in the topic, whether they are service providers, cloud providers, big users of data spaces that also want to fit in our work. And we will talk later about how we also have a little foot in standard development organization with the liaison, because the work we do in name of the European Commission can also influence how standards develop in the future. Let's move one step to the right to see how we distill what we learned from you in something that can be then used. From a DSSC perspective, I put a nice example there that is very relevant to this community. Is a review we've done of standard and technologies for data interoperability. So that should probably be nothing new to you. Almost a bit ashamed to showing this for you because you are the expert, not more, possibly more than us. But it's a good example of how a lot of what we learn from you needs then to be returned back. This work is available on the website, as many other similar studies that simply look at what's outside and chooses what sounds to be a good fit for Europe from in terms of, say, alignment with European legislation, what often our officer friends call the European values, right? All of those technologies are not necessarily all the same from that perspective. And that is where the distillation comes. But also Simpl does some distillation. Manuel, can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think along the open source spirit that I was mentioning in the previous step, we are very much trying to avoid ourselves to reinvent the wheel. Simpl Open is being developed in a context where many third-party organizations have been looking at specific technologies or specific subcomponents of Simpl, and there was strictly no point in redeveloping those. And so we reuse them in the sense that they are themselves open source. You see there on screen a number of components and which technology we reuse or aim to reuse. And beyond the acronyms, the most attentive of you will have recognized the Eclipse data connector or the Gaia-X set of tools. But the strength of Simpl Open is to reuse those and represent them in an integrated manner, so to serve the full suite of needs of data spaces.
Thanks, Manu. And all of this work of distillation needs to become also something that is then synthesized. Perhaps the biggest examples of this come more from my side than Manuel. We need to do a lot of development, unfortunately, also original content sometimes. So from everything we learned, we create original assets for guidance. Remember, it's one of our missions, and for everybody potentially to reuse. Possibly without going through the full list, the most visible of these assets for guidance is what we call the blueprint. The term was actually coined by the European Commission. We wanted something that became a kind of a reference guide of the typical functionalities you would expect to find in a data space. There are probably two families of those, at least the ones we identified. This work is almost 2 years old now, through several iterations, so it's quite mature. There's the business and organizational side, describing elements like what does it mean for a business to participate in a data space, the elements of governance of the data space itself, and the legal aspects of it. And of course, the more obvious, perhaps, technical elements of a data space, as much as we insisted earlier, a data space is not just the technology of it, it's the system coming together, made of interoperability element, the element of sovereignty and trust. Those two words probably you hear a lot when talking about data spaces because of how discriminant characteristics they are to the systems, and the value creation. So, for example, how you create a product to be channeled through a data space for others to reuse, a data product. So all of this becomes the series of elements of guidance we provide, and that on top of which the support we give to our data spaces is given. Remember, this work comes from you. We are just the guys who put the stuff together. So please, if you're interested in feeding your experience into this, but we will remind you later, you can do it. This is not something coming from the DSSC ivory tower. While Manuel instead is building a lot. You told already about open, but can you go a bit more in detail, please?
Yeah. So indeed, this step is purely technical. So this is where this is why only Simpl is involved in this stage. So all I said before, of course, it's absolutely necessary and needs to be done, of preparing, reusing, thinking. But at some point, you actually need to build your house, right? And this is what this step is. If all those things on screen look way too small, it's because they're all available in our public web pages, and this is where we've put the QR codes all the way. You see on the top side a little bit how the different actors interact among themselves. The bottom bluish, purplish things are the high-level requirements, which are then detailed. And the middle thing is a timeline, a roadmap of technical deployments and availability of the different components along along their developments, really. So again, unavoidable step, and I encourage you to go and dive, if you are on the techie side, what's behind underneath the hood.
Thanks, Manuel. And we're getting close to the end of the cycle, so start warming up your questions. Let's go to support. So we often talk about in terms of ecosystem when we talk about data spaces. Of course, we can build the software, we can write a nice book about data spaces, but in the end, out there are communities of potential prospective participants that need to decide if data spaces are for them. There are organizations that may want to start a data space. There are providers of software and services. There is so much more to be done to support that ecosystem to gain traction and to grow in a sustainable way, right? So in the support column for the SSC side, there's a lot of small perhaps is diminishing, a lot of little tools that contribute to this picture in their specifics. For example, there's something we call the radar, that is simply a catalog of data spaces that we know of out there. It's crowdsourced. You can submit your own, describe its characteristics. Besides, where do you go if you need to find a data space that is a good fit for you, right? This is at the moment, to the best of our knowledge, unless you rely on word of mouth, is the best way to find the data spaces we know, whether they are, by the way, European or not. The toolbox is simply a catalog of software components like the one that Simpl is reusing that are available to either connect to a data space as a participant or operate services in a data space. And one of my favorite personally, perhaps I'm biased because I participate into those, are the role plays that the SSC offers to host organization that simply invite us to go there. We've done one for JRC, for example, that became a paper. That is the one you see on screen, specifically to analyze by simply playing the parts, the spectrum of stakeholders involved in the design of a health data space, not necessarily the real one, but a functional one that needed to analyze what are the interests of people, medical institutions, research, member states into, for example, collecting personal data describing the health of the owners of devices like smartwatches and stuff like that. So these tools are, in my opinion, amazing to actually bring that kind of more cold guidance that you may find in the blueprint down to your level, your specific problems, and your specific challenge. Manuel, how does support look from your side, at least at this stage of Simpl?
Yeah, I want to emphasize what you said, Gianfranco, a second ago. You said, in my opinion, those are very important. I think it's not only yours; it's certainly mine, and I think the one of the community as well. I think what we've all found out over the years is that the complicated part is not the technical part, or it is, but it's kind of a second. It's a day two complication. The first complication for wannabe data spaces is day one. Is what does it mean from a legal point of view, from an organizational point of view? If we are to become a trusted ecosystem of organizations, who do we trust and on which ground, and how do we accept others? And if we want to collaborate in between data spaces, what are the questions to ask ourselves at that moment? And the work of the Data Space Support Center is key on that angle. But then, of course, when looking at when it comes to pure support on the Simpl side, on technical things, there's really three angles. The first one I mentioned, I already mentioned all of them, but just to recap, the open source community is there in spirit and in reality to listen to external requests, to reply to external suggestions, to embark new code or bug fixing that comes from the outside. And then we give back as well the support in the sense that for dedicated data spaces, we are actively paying contractors to help them onboard Simpl and really get their hands dirty into the code and their servers to make this a reality day to day. It goes with a bit more of nuances, but those are the two main elements.
Thanks, Manuel. And I believe this closed nicely the cycle with the element of dissemination. Probably nothing that needs to be explained in too much detail, right? We both initiative as website where we try to offer everything we have for you. The SSC has a newsletter. Simpl is going to launch theirs very, very soon. We both run events to try to bring all of this knowledge and guidance and assets to you so you can understand them better, get to know the people who make them. We film most of what we do so we can offer that back to you as webinars like this, the videos from the conferences that are as an example on screen. So there's plenty of opportunity for you to learn more about us in more detail, and over time more and more of this material will be created and offered to you. Perhaps one extra element from this I told you already about the element of liaison that probably fits here to some degree, because we mostly, as a project, we are more like observers than actual participants in standard organization, but still necessary, I would say, and important. If we had more time, I would tell you about JTC 25 in CNECT and the work we're doing to create a maturity model for data spaces that the Commission needs to use to evaluate the level of maturity that the initiatives are achieving. But we will need much more time than the one we have now. Manuel, you want to add anything to this dimension?
No, not necessarily. If you now get to the following slide, it covers a bit dissemination as well, and maybe I'll take both together.
Of course.
So what's ahead for us, and some of those elements are about dissemination. First, we're in the process of launching new contracts. First, on Simpl Open, the current contract runs from January 24 to December 26. So we're almost in 2 weeks, we'll be halfway there. It's fair to say that since this initial contract and the vision which already dates back to 22 or so, new elements and new requirements have come to the fore, and we felt the need to launch a new extension, if you want, of Simpl Open, which will cover artificial intelligence. In other words, how to enable and how to embed AI tools inside of your data space. And here it's obviously an echo to the very introductory slides of Gianfranco when he was quoting OpenAI founder saying, you know, we don't have enough data, or there's no more data. But yes, we do, because data spaces produce it. And if you plug into it the AI tools, then you immediately can benefit from them. As well, a connection with high-performance computers, so that it's not only about software, but as well about providing the processing power over which we can all this magic can happen. And the headline was too short, but there's a third part which came as well to the fore over those years, is the idea of monetization of data spaces. In the initial vision, the idea that data could be sold to each other in between a user and a provider of data was already embedded. But we've seen through some unfortunate events in some ecosystems that the supervisors or organizers, the managers of data spaces, were themselves startups struggling to survive from a commercial point of view. And we will be enhancing Simpl Open with different means for governing authorities of Simpl to be able to monetize their services. I don't enter into the details, but it's fairly easy to imagine. Then we will pursue Simpl Labs and Simpl Life. So far, we've only been doing feasibility studies, and we will then get into implementation. And then this is the link with the dissemination earlier. There's a whole range of dissemination activities. I think there's three that I want to highlight. First, because the first one is very nearby, and it's about a webinar on how to install Simpl Open. It's a brand new tool. There's only the first minimum viable platform was released in January, so it's still fresh. And the installation, it's not a one-click yet. So a technical explanation on how to set it up will be the subject of a webinar in 2 weeks' time. We keep updating documentation regularly, and we have in the pipeline an update to our architecture document by mid-July. We're in the final stages of verifying this, and I think this is one of the most requested question from the community. Then, of course, we have social media and the launch of the newsletter. But then the annual event that we do have, I think the date is 28th of January, 26 in Brussels. 29, it's on screen. I mixed with last year. So 29 January 2026. We haven't yet booked the place, but it's high time for everyone to mark the calendars before things get too crazy for next year.
Thanks, Manuel. And from the HCC perspective, we are close to the end of the project, or the first project at least. We are finally going on holiday in April next year, but this does not mean we can relax too much, right? Remember, support is in the name. The main thing when we are focusing in the next few months is to try to raise the bar of the elements of support of the project. We call them informally the pilots. We're trying to get our hands a bit more dirty than we did in the first part of the project, getting closer to the data spaces and delivering something a bit more deeper, a bit more complicated. Typically, for example, testing the cross-data space interoperability of different data spaces. If I'm a participant in one, how easy it is to perform some of the typical actions of data spaces in another through a federation of the two, instead of becoming also a user of the second one. That's not as easy as perhaps it is to say in English. And all of these, by the way, are still being defined. If you're watching and you are one of the EC-funded data spaces and you did not know we were trying to organize this, just come to us. We will be super happy to consider your opportunities and to work with you to try to make this a real tangible outcome of our project. Of course, we still have major iterations of our deliverables to come. The last blueprint for this DSSC will come around January. We also have an annual event that will close the project, most likely in February, so a bit 1 month later than the Simpl one, although it's not defined yet, so don't book your flights to Madrid yet. And we know that there will be a DSSC2, because the Commission was kind enough to find a way to continue the work deep into 2028. But this is not awarded yet, so we don't know how it will look like. For sure, it will inherit the capital knowledge developed by the first one and continue it and maintain it over time. And this, I believe, is everything we had before the questions. Nico, if we can give it back to you for slide pass.
Thank you very, very much for the presentation. I think it was really concise and very informative, so we learned a lot. And we have a lot of questions in the chat, so I will give the priority to the audience, and I will read in order the questions. But of course, if anyone has also other additional questions, just feel free and raise your hands. Okay. So the first one: could some specific use cases be mentioned where Simpl is already used? Mateo.
Thanks a lot. As I mentioned, the minimum viable product was already only released in January, and so there's not to date any working deployment of Simpl in a real situation. But there's so the colleagues of JRC are experimenting, because that's what they're doing. But I think, and this is proving very useful, as if you want our first client or guinea pig, if the comparison is allowed here. But we are working with 6 data spaces: health, public procurement, EOSC, Destination Earth, and I forgot right now the 2 others, where we are, we've done the feasibility study on how to deploy it, and we will sign the contracts later this year. And we've started the second round of 4 other data spaces: mobility, energy, agri, and green, where we are currently conducting the feasibility studies, again with a view that the deployment happens next year. So to be short and completely frank, today no deployment, but a big pipeline.
Mm-hmm. And what about the future plans? So ultimately, are all common European data spaces are going to use Simpl? And to what extent shall the data holders as well care about Simpl, who are collaborating with the data spaces?
The answer is, there will be no kind of legal obligation across the board to use Simpl for common European data spaces. That's not the intention. I mean, the intention is more the carrot than the stick to deploy it. So to show that it's a great tool and that it serves the purpose, the needs of data spaces in general. But in the context of the digital work program, where we give funding to data spaces, there we push a little bit more users in to do it. And we do it in a bit adjusted manner, in the sense that some data spaces exist since many years. I'm thinking about Europeana and the cultural data space, where they already have an existing deployment, where there we are much more soft and understanding. It's not about replacing something that works quite well, but the idea there is, because Simpl is modular, that those data spaces can use components, and only some components of Simpl where they lack that functionality, or where they need an upgrade, that they adopt Simpl, or that they use the Simpl as the tool to interconnect to other existing data spaces. So this is the one extreme example of a very established data space. And then when you look at the other extreme of something which is in its complete infancy, then there we try to really bring Simpl on board as the default tool from the very beginning. But again, with this idea that modularity allows you to customize to particular needs of particular data spaces.
Okay, one more question about the other actors. So how does Simpl interact with potential other actors such as Gaia-X? We hear a lot about that. We participated at the Semantics in Data Spaces workshop at the SWC a few weeks ago. And a lot of data spaces mention Gaia-X. So what is the connection between Simpl and Gaia-X?
Yeah, so it's a classic question that I thought I had anticipated earlier, but it's the one and only, not the only, but the one question we get on and on together. The idea is that Gaia-X tends to be a little bit more known, but there's a constellation of other tools that exist out there that work in the same area. Eclipse, ITSA, Fireware, to name but a few others, and the idea here is to reuse the components as much as possible. I'm sure technical people will give you more nuanced answers, but the idea is that we take as an assumption that these people have been cracking the code on specific points where Simpl needs this component, but Simpl integrates that into a broad and comprehensive ecosystem. So, for example, the trusted exchange of data is done through the Eclipse data connector, or the catalog functionality of Simpl is built over Gaia-X standards. And so we reuse those components and integrate them into a comprehensive tool.
Thank you. The next question is to Gianfranco. You mentioned the maturity model that is upcoming. So what aspects of the maturity will you be looking at? Standardization or semantic? Yeah.
So that's super interesting. I'll try to give you the short version. You know that the European Commission uses, let's say, soft power, influence. They cannot tell you what to do unless for very specific topics, right? So the maturity model has been conceived as an instrument to kindly point the data space initiatives in Europe in the right direction without necessarily writing more legislation. Our friend Ivo Follman in G1 told us on stage a few months ago, don't expect more data legislation. We've had enough, we're tired, now just build the stuff, right? And this is the spirit. So we won't write more legislation. Well, they will not write more legislation to tell you what you do, but we will still try to push you in the right direction. The maturity model is an instrument that was conceived to try in a way to reward you as much as your choices correspond to the expectation of the European Commission for a healthy development of the data space ecosystem as a whole. In terms of what question it puts, how the assessment is done, it mirrors what I described earlier, the blueprint. So if on one side we invite you, for example, to use decentralized trust frameworks. On the other, we will ask you, we reward you more when you do. This does not mean that you are a bad piece of software or a bad data space, but just that we would like to kindly move in that direction because we believe it is best in the interest of the European Union. There are elements of standardization, there are elements of design choices. I believe there are also elements of business or choices in terms of value proposition for the data space.
Thank you. And then I think we have time for 2 more questions. Oh, yes, about the sustainability. I think you already replied it partially, Gianfranco. I think it's that is fine. One more question about the standards. Why not using DCAT for the catalogs? This is also a very well-known and widely used standard in the EU framework. I could say. So, do you promote DCAT or how?
Yeah. So on DCAT, maybe I think so. The question is very valid, of course. I think there's a slight confusion on the term of catalogs, in the sense that there's catalogs at different layers of the onion. The DCAT are catalogs for vocabularies, and Simpl is vocabulary agnostic and accepts the use of different vocabulary catalogs, including DCAT AP. But for other purposes, and those are the ones I was referring earlier, for lower layers of catalogs, we use another technology. But in terms of DCAT AP compatibility, this is fully ensured.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe just one more short question from my side, because I cannot resist and I need to ask this. How do you see the role of reference data in data spaces in general? Any of you can reply.
I believe you know already the answer, but let's remind the audience. So where would you go without reference data, right? So the data exchanges that happen in data spaces are most often related to shared entities of some kind. And in most cases, those are not standard, it's not the right word here, but reference enough to require unique identifier to be identified in an unequivocal way by everybody across the whole space. And we know there is reference data from the EU, from member states, but also from private organizations. One of the best example is GS1, that gives a kind of an ID to every commercial retail product, the ones behind the barcode when you go to the shopping for groceries, right? So this stuff is inevitable. Can you imagine the confusion if in a data space we could not rely on reference data to identify the items we are processing, right? The SSE, because we stand a bit at the back, we're not sector specific, we just need to enable the others, but the many data spaces developing sectorially, can you say sectorially? Each of them are choosing the reference data that is relevant to their specific context. Of course, we're not yet in a perfectly mature stage where everything is clear and in place, but that's the idea. Reference data merges, let's say, the understanding of the participants so that they can only focus on the layer above that is sharing their specific data that they hold. Yeah, I feel like I'm explaining something perhaps too simple for this audience, but sorry.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So thank you very, very much again for the presentation. I think we need to close because the time is over, but we will share the slides and the recording on our website. And again, congratulations to all the advancements that you have done, and also for this excellent collaboration between the two infrastructures. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks a lot, Aniko, for the initiative.
Thank you.
It was a great. See you soon, Gianfranco.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.